And good morning. Welcome to Backchannel on this Friday. Yes, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show, as it says right there. I'm in Los Angeles, California, and you are, well, wherever you are, wherever you fancy being today, you just stay right there. We've got your back. And we've got Backchannel for you. A couple of hours with me as we look through some of the morning papers, talk about what's happening across the world, across the United States, and get a sense of, just trying to make sense of it all. That's what we're trying to do. Just trying to make sense of it all. If you want to get in touch, then just wake up your Echo show, say the word say, and then your message. You can do the same with backchannel.tv in the web browser. Backchannel.tv, type it in, and then just send me a message that way. And if you have YouTube or you want to watch the show and you don't have access to an Echo show, then watch the show at YouTube, which is some kind of video platform, I think. Not so sure. I'm in Los Angeles, California. Travis is here as well. He's in Los Angeles, California. We're both in Los Angeles, California, the land of the facelift. And so we're going to kind of work our way through the news, have a little bit of a chat, here and there, and see what's happening. Opposite Hippopotamus has just jumped in from Massachusetts already joining us on the show. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to look through the morning papers in just a minute. Also, we'll be discussing the U.S. jobs, which rise again as firms raise wages to woo staff. LGBTQ groups sue Florida over the so-called Don't Say Gay law. Also, the Pope apologizes to Indigenous leaders for abuses at Canada residential schools. So that's kind of the big stories making the headlines. Those are the ones we're going to look at together in detail in just a little while. First, though, let's jump into the morning papers this morning. Oh, Dennis is in, Lawful Links as well. Welcome. Willkommen, bienvenue. Nice to see you. Okay, let's jump into some of the papers. Let's see what we have here. Okay, Washington Times is first, I think. Let's see what they have to offer on this Friday morning. Oh, it's the 1st of April. Does that mean that everything today has to be like a joke? A bit of a joke. Well, this link to the Washington Herald is a bit of a joke. It doesn't seem to be working, Travis. Maybe all the links to the newspapers are just an April Fool for me. It's like they're all booby-trapped. Is that what's happened? The Durango Herald works nicely. It says, serving the heart of southwest Colorado. A photograph, wages and workers, it says, and a picture of a couple of people working in a fancy kitchen. And it says, pandemics of the past have demonstrated the power of change to change the course of human history. Some workers in Durango say COVID-19 has upset the status quo when it comes to work. Well, the Black Plague contributed to the end of feudalism in the 14th century by killing huge swathes of medieval Europe's workforce. The labor shortages gave surviving serfs leverage over the nobles for better treatment. Sound familiar? Well, employment in the United States fell by 9.4 million workers in the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. But even with the introduction of vaccines and dropped restrictions concerning the virus, some Durango businesses are still struggling to recruit workers, according to the Durango Chamber of Commerce and Service Industry and business professionals. Like the Black Plague centuries ago, COVID-19 may have expedited a culture shift among workers that is observable here in Durango. It says Denise Mickelson, spokesperson for the Colorado Restaurant Association, said the restaurant industry was suffering labor shortage even before COVID-19 spread across the globe. Interesting. I mean, look, a lot of employers are having to pay more now, and so they are. Westside residents buy mobile home park, and Women's Resource Center names 2 as extraordinary women. Stacey's in from Texas. CJ's in from Texas as well. Denny's is in Florida. Lawful Links is in. And welcome to you all. Welcome, one and all. God bless us, everyone. Okay, next up, the San Francisco Chronicle is where we're going to head. They lead this morning with research triumph on human blueprint. This is a very interesting story about the genetic code, mapping the human genome. An international team of students led by geneticists at UC Santa Cruz and the National Institutes of Health has published the first truly complete human genome, a dramatic advance in understanding the role of genetics in disease and evolution that closes the last gaps in cataloguing the 3 billion paired molecules that make up our DNA. The full genetic sequence, first reported last summer, but officially unveiled in the journal Science on Thursday, finally fills in the roughly 8% of the human genome that scientists have been unable to work out since publishing their first draft more than 20 years ago. The effort involved an unprecedented grassroots collaboration of scientists around the world, many working remotely, of course. So there we go. Isn't that exciting? The human blueprint is finally mapped. I mean, think about this for a second. If you take the human genome, which is now mapped, and you combine that with, say, MRSA, not MRSA, that's a hospital-acquired infection, mRNA vaccines, which, of course, we've seen in Pfizer and Moderna, these spike proteins. You combine those two technologies, and you would potentially be able to cure cancer or any of the great diseases. There's a very good chance that we are advancing now at such a rate. They've said this. They've said that those types of vaccines could potentially cure cancer. Eviction protection extended 3 months. This is as the sun set over Vallejo on Tuesday night. Crystal Little reshuffled her clipboard and stepped up to yet another apartment door. The first woman who answered told Little, a local tenant organizer, that she'd been waiting weeks for answers from a state program that promised to help pay off pandemic rent debt. A neighbor upstairs said she didn't have any debt, but worried about a recent rent increase. Farther down the block of aging 2-story buildings with paint peeling around the windows, a mother laid off from her job early in the pandemic began to cry when she talked about the eviction notices tacked on her door each month. It says, with deadline looming for California's emergency renter aid programs, she moved her children in with her sister this week to at least shield them from whatever might come next. I really don't know what my rights are anymore in this weird grey space that we're in, said the mother, who asked not to be identified for fear of jeopardizing a new job. I cared too much about the childhood memories to risk that. Yes, after the 31st of March, state applications closed for more than $5 billion in emergency federal funding set aside to pay California landlords back for pandemic rent debt. Rent debt, I should say, not ret. And then finally, 2 coaching legends continue rivalry in women's Final Four. Story out of Minneapolis. This is dueling legends. East Coast versus West Coast, and all the stereotypes and media biases involved in the purification. So there we go, San Francisco Chronicle there. Flimsy Dinosaurs dropped in, hello. Silent Pig from Pennsylvania, welcome. And Stacey, yes, I am definitely ready to spend my lunch hour, your lunch hour, with me. And finally, the Lawrence Journal World. Let's take a look at that out of Kentucky. They lead with, we should all feel a little bit lucky. This is lauded vaccine scientist, gives a KU speech, says COVID-19 shots' rapid development was a stroke of good fortune. He hopes vaccine hesitancy will decline. Dr. Barney Graham, widely credited as one of the key researchers who developed today's life-saving COVID-19 vaccines, knows some people won't receive the vaccine because they worry it was developed too quickly. But what he also knows is the world is quite lucky to have that worry. It's true. I mean, I've said this time and time again, It wasn't developed too quickly. They've been developing this technology for years. They just suddenly had opportunity to use it. They knew it would work. They knew they could do it quickly. And it worked out to be a huge success, Okay, let's see what else do we have here. Lawmakers okay new districts for legislature, education board. This is Kansas lawmakers have given final approval to a redistricting measure that's likely to preserve Republican supermajorities in the legislature while possibly moving the state school board to the right. The state Senate on Wednesday night approved 29-11, a single bill containing plans for its members, the Kansas House and the State Board of Education, shortly after the House approved it, 83-40. I mean, look, half the country is being pulled now so far to the right that it's not going to benefit anyone. It's not going to benefit the poor people that vote traditionally for the Conservatives. I have no idea why they do that. They're just voting for the wrong team. Okay, North Carolina next. The News and Observer. They lead this morning with Battle of Blue Orleans. Duke and UNC are to meet at the Final Four in New Orleans for the first time. Is it the state's biggest sporting event is the question. That's literally all that's on the front of the newspaper. That's all that's there. Okay, next up is the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette for Pennsylvania. Spiking killings raises alarm, it says. Mayor launches critical incident review to find root cause. A recent spate of homicides, including the Wednesday killings of a 15-year-old in Homewood and a 25-year-old man in Mount Washington, promised Pittsburgh's mayor to issue a statement on Thursday condemning the violence. Ed Gainey said in a written statement that his prayers were the families of Davon Vickers, a teen killed on North Homewood Avenue on Wednesday, and Devontae White, who was found shot and killed in Brookline late on Tuesday night. I mean, this is, it's an epidemic, isn't it, It's an epidemic of biblical proportions, the number of killings that seem to go on. Biden oil move aims to cut gas prices. Yes, President Joe Biden on Thursday ordered the release of 1 million barrels of oil per day from the nation's strategic petroleum reserve for 6 months, a bid to control energy prices that have spiked after the United States and allies imposed steep sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. I mean, I don't know that that's the right thing to do. Why not just temporarily nationalize the oil companies? Because the only reason that oil is so expensive and gas is so expensive is because the energy companies are making huge profits. They could reduce the price, just nationalize them. Use the Defense Production Act, nationalize them. That's radical. Be radical. Be as radical on the left as Trump was radical on the right. The president said it was not known how much gasoline prices could decline as a result of his move, but he suggested it might be anything from 10 cents to 35 cents a gallon. Gas is averaging around $4.23 a gallon compared with $2.87 a year ago. The bottom line is, if we want to lower gas prices, more oil supply, we need more oil supply right now. He said this is a moment of consequence and peril for the world and pain at the pump for the American families. I mean, I think this is a joke. I'll be honest, it's a joke. We're trying to encourage green energy and save the planet. And the President of the United States is encouraging these companies to drill more and faster. I mean, it just makes me... I just think the world's gone mad. The president also wants Congress to impose financial penalties on oil and gas companies, at least on public lands, but are not producing. Production Act. Oh, yeah, he said he will invoke the Defense Production Act to encourage the mining of critical minerals for batteries and electric vehicles, part of a broader push to shift towards cleaner energy sources and reduce the use of fossil fuels. The actions show that oil remains a vulnerability for the U.S. Higher prices have hurt Mr. Biden's approval domestically and added billions of oil export dollars to the Russian government as it wages war on Ukraine. That's the irony of this, really, isn't it? And then there's a photograph of, it says, final beam at Mill 19. This is Evan Hubner of Century Steel Erectors unfurling an American flag that's attached to the final piece of steel being erected at the RIDC Mill 19 building on Thursday in Hazelwood. The beam was designed... it was built as a munitions production factory during World War II. It's being redeveloped as a hub for manufacturing and research and development. And it's got huge solar panels on the roof. It's so good. Also, Dems boycott Pennsylvania Senate hearing on ballot drop boxes. Yes, Republican members of a Senate committee tasked with investigating the 2020 and 2021 elections questioned the security of the state's ballot drop boxes on Thursday, with Democrats boycotting the meeting over the GOP's refusal to swear in witnesses. The State Senate Intergovernmental Operations Committee, a rarely used panel intended to discuss government operations, met for the first time in 7 months. This is one of several GOP-led committees criticizing and questioning the constitutionality of the state's widely popular vote-by-mail law in response to former President Donald Trump's unproven claims that the election was stolen from him. There's a very good documentary that just dropped on PBS about, the Trump's false election fraud claim. And it's not just Trump saying it out loud. There was literally thousands of people behind him trying to overturn the election. Everybody. Giuliani and General Michael Flynn and all just dozens of people were on this, all part of this machine to overturn the election. Why does it matter so much to them? I mean, what is it? What is so fundamental and important about winning? If you're not voted for by the people, if the people reject you, what is this obsession with winning? Apart from an autocracy, apart from a dictatorship, apart from this crazy kind of, I don't know what you would call it, kangaroo government. It just beggars belief, really. The Washington Post has arrived. Thank you very much, Travis. Ceasefire set for ravaged Mariupol. I mean, why ceasefire now? You've blown everything up. There's literally nothing left. What's the point of a ceasefire? Russian and Ukrainian officials agreed to temporary ceasefire in the besieged southern port city of Mariupol, with evacuations planned for Friday, even as the Pentagon reported devastating airstrikes there and in Kiev, the capital, over the previous 24 hours. Dozens of buses began arriving in the area around Mariupol on Thursday to deliver humanitarian aid and transport civilians, an effort that a spokesman for the International Committee of the Red Cross called desperately important for a city that has borne the worst of Russia's invasion, and where 100,000 residents may still be trapped. Yeah. So there it is. Pregnant at higher COVID risk among pregnant people who are vaccinated against coronavirus, nearly twice as likely to get COVID as those who are not pregnant, according to a new study that offers the broadest evidence to date of the odds of infections among vaccinated patients with different medical circumstances. The analysis, based on medical records of nearly 14 million US patients since coronavirus immunization became available, found that pregnant people who are vaccinated have the greatest risk of developing COVID among a dozen medical states, including being an organ transplant recipient and having cancer. There it is. Despite sanctions, ruble and Russian banks recovering. Yes, the ruble and banking system are showing continued signs of recovery from the initial punch of sanctions, as Moscow relies on energy exports and currency controls to partly protect the nation's economy. There it is. And also Greg Locke, this is a pastor dividing his community. The pastor promised his followers that his church service would be like no other. And the event on Sunday in March did not disappoint. Devil, your foot soldiers are coming out tonight. They're coming all the way out. We will expel them, Pastor Greg Locke howled from the stage in a crowded white tent. You got to leave, devil, he shouted. You got to get out. Yeah, this guy is he's kind of a crazy Trump QAnon guy. And it's quite something, you know. He was at the Capitol during the January 6th attack. And he preaches from the stage of Global Vision Bible Church in Tennessee. I've seen this guy in a documentary. He's nuts. A border edict may trap Democrats as fall vote nears, is the headline also on the Washington Post. There it is. Travis, are you around? Or are you busy? I wanted to ask you a question about being an American. Because, you know, being an American is not something I'm very familiar with.
I don't know about that. Good morning.
Well, I'm familiar, obviously. You can have half the screen if you want. You've got this desire to reduce yourself to you're smaller than my microphone. But I mean, if you're more comfortable there, that's fine. I just think about people with an Echo Show where you are literally, you're literally so small you can't be seen. But that's fine if you want to stay like that. I don't want to impose my views on you. I mean,
can I stay down here if I spend the entire show like this?
Well, you need to look the other way. That's it. There you go. And I could look down on you like this.
Oh, this is great.
Oh, no, you're this way. There you go. You see? Little Travis. Little Travis.
Hello.
Come here, little Travis. I'll get a hold of you.
All right, I'll come in full screen. I'll come in half screen. Screen.
There we go. So what I wanted to ask you, because we were talking a little bit earlier about the overturning of the election, and I don't know if you've seen it yet. It only dropped a couple of days ago, but there's a PBS documentary, and I know you don't have time for television because you're so busy, making music and stuff, but there's this documentary that I watched half of last night about the overturning of the election, and it was all new stuff. I hadn't seen any of this stuff before. This was about a private jet loaded with these, what would you call them, like henchmen, showing up at some county voting site to demand they look at Dominion voting machines. The whole thing was like there's a whole conspiracy going on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And Mike Flynn was at this ranch on the weekend, like ahead of the January 6th, and they were all planning it, and Giuliani but like people you've never heard of. Like they've all been working for months to kind of work out how to illegitimately overturn the US election. And this was a massive operation involving literally hundreds and thousands of people. From footmen, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers on the day, giving Roger Stone security and being ready with their, in their militia costumes. Costumes, that really belittles them, doesn't it? Costumes. Doing your cosplay, doing your militia cosplay.
Yeah.
To say that this was a concerted effort to bring down the US government, to overturn a fair and free election.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's like still, here we are a year and a half later almost, and we're still kind of churning through the intel.
Mm-hmm.
And making arrests and subpoenas and indictments. Takes time. And they're only slowly starting to come into the center and, to see what obviously Trump led all of this, it's so clear. He was obviously the mastermind behind all of it. How do you feel being an American? This is the question that I'm coming to. Like, you're an American person, born and bred in the Americas. And that you're living in a country where your own people are turning against the country and trying to overthrow the government to install a leader that lost the election. Now, this is the type of stuff that happened in Italy with Berlusconi, or, in the most corrupt countries in the world. How much of your time and your energy do you give over to the notion that your democracy is now completely flawed, and that you're living in a country that is so broken it will probably never recover because of the misinformation and because I was with my landlord yesterday, who's a Trump supporter, and he is convinced that Trump won. Convinced, 100%. Doesn't even question. Won't acknowledge Biden.
Mm.
How does it feel to be an American in a land where this has actually happened? Not a threat, could happen, could be a coup, it actually happened. How does it feel? And another thing, no, I'm kidding.
No. It's funny, throughout that I felt like an impassioned cross-examination speech to which I was, we were about to turn the corner on some case. Unfortunately, it's just a state of things. And how much of my energy that I give over is dependent on, one, news, and two, just my ability to sort of participate these days. Of course, as it's happening, it's like a terrible fireworks display. It's a car crash in slow motion. It's hard to imagine living in a reality where the confidence in the basic fundamental functions of our democracy and our government were undermined so severely in such a violent and untrue way that, and this goes back to something that we spoke of, I think, yesterday, where there is a swath of people in the United States that are so disillusioned with what they feel to be the state of things in this country and like who's running things, quote unquote, and people looking to assign their anger and their jealousy and their feelings of, any negative emotion one could have towards the government, they will take that as validation to believe that, this isn't the way things really are. This is just a big joke. This is a big scheme. That has taken time to settle in. another person I mentioned yesterday, I would have many conversations with my grandfather, a very, very well-read, critical thinking individual. And even he recently passed. He was 96, and he had seen that real golden stretch in American culture. That post World War II.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of, the census information for 1950 just dropped today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they just finished adding it up.
Yeah. They said, we've done it.
Yeah.
Did we miss anything? Even he, who had seen so much and what was disillusioned and just flabbergasted at how our country could have backslid so heavily. In not just our reputation around the world and the ability for other countries to sort of continue to trust in us in a way that doesn't feel obligatory but feels validated, but also, honestly, it feels difficult sometimes to imagine what the country will be like in 10 years, so to speak, which you could say at any point in time, but I think now more than ever, because not just in this disillusionment sense on the right, but also on the left, a lot of my contemporaries around my age group feel a equal opposite lack of confidence in our systems of government, which there are always going to be people, and there's an argument that now everybody just knows what everybody's thinking more because everybody has a worldwide platform in 6 different directions anytime they want.
But it's not based in truth, though, because, the American kind of voting system was heralded as being one of the most secure and safest.
Yeah.
There has never been any widespread fraud in the American voting system, ever.
Correct.
And yet, because Trump started sowing the seeds of this a year before the election, because he knew that if he lost, he didn't want to look like a loser, so he thought he would just blame fraud. So he started sowing this, which is what autocrats do, because they don't like to lose. And so now you're right, people on both sides are questioning, well, hang on, is the election even fair?
Exactly.
But there's no evidence.
No, there's not. And people that have worked in government on both sides of the aisle have gone on record, I mean, to the degree where they're just, it feels reminiscent of climate scientists just screaming, pleading, for the love of God, look at these numbers here.
Yeah, like don't look up.
Yeah, exactly. Which, didn't like the movie, but the message is true. It's like, yeah, no, we're kind of, in a sense, if you look at it the wrong way, we're all boned. But yeah, it's a darn shame when even career Republicans, it may have even been Trump Republicans who work in like state officials' office or work on election boards are saying, no, believe me, this all worked, and then people just say, no, it didn't. Like, hold on.
Yeah.
And there's a logic break where there's no possible way to continue the conversation past that point, because when someone is emotionally dug in, you may as well try to move a mountain.
Well, here's an example. My racist landlord was over yesterday replacing my kitchen faucet.
That's
because he bought such a cheap one.
What a
initially.
complicated scenario that must be.
Yeah, he bought such a cheap faucet originally that, of course, it failed after a year, and then he went to replace it, went to Home Depot, and he came back with exactly the same one.
Good.
Which just is like, really?
That's
really?
Very
I said to him, I'll see you in a year. Anyway, we were talking about the movie Don't Look Up, and I said, it's like it draws its equivalence on what's happening now with climate change, and the comet represents climate change. And he said, what are you talking about? He thought it was just a disaster movie like Deep Impact or Armageddon. And I said, no, it's a commentary on climate change and on misinformation and on the Instagram generation and all of it, Completely passed him by. He had no concept because he's a Trump guy.
Wow.
And so, of course, none of that figures because climate change isn't real in his mind. It's not a thing. And then he spent 10 minutes explaining to me that, there was an ice age in England and that, this is just cyclical and this is like natural and it's nothing to do with fossil fuel. And I was like, yeah, okay.
That is,
and he's 71 and he's a multi-millionaire and he votes conservative his whole life and He genuinely only watches Fox News and listens and and Facebook, and that's where he gets all of his echo chamber news. And he said some vaccine stuff to me yesterday, and I said that's not true. And he said, "What do you mean it's not true?" And I said, "What you're telling me is not true." And he said, "But it was on the news." And I said, "Well, what news?" And he said, "Fox." I said, "It's not true." He says, "You think everything on Fox is not true." I said, "It's not true. Nothing on Fox is true." But he just cannot get his head around it. And he is so typical of so many, of half the country, effectively, or maybe it's less than half. I think it's less than half, but maybe, it's maybe a third of the country that are so committed to this cause. Yeah. But this is why I say to you, it's like, what you said was very interesting, that it's like, if you can process it, like, have you got enough bandwidth to get your head around the fact that the US democratic voting system is being undermined by lies? Mm-hmm. And it's a lot to process, right?
It is.
To know what to do with that.
Yeah, I say it's not impossible, because it feels like trying to, make breakfast during an earthquake.
Yeah.
You're just trying to live, and you would like to be prepared for the earthquake. You would hope that you would be, but at a certain point,
you got to pay your rent
impossible.
in the meantime.
Exactly. Yeah. It's real nuts out there.
That's the tragedy of it. It's like working so hard. American workers work so hard compared to European workers. I mean, about siestas, for example, in Spain. It's like
just the most wonderful idea anybody ever had.
Yeah,
just the best
let's
idea.
Just disappear for 2.5 hours in the afternoon. We'll go have a few drinks. We'll have a sleep. And then we'll come back and have a nice lazy afternoon. Take it easy. Some people have a siesta and it just extends for the rest of the day. and the reality is that that's how we should be living. That is how we should be living. The notion that we only get 2 weeks off and we're working 16-hour days, and then boasting about how little sleep you get in the office, and how and therefore how kind of, Ariana Huffington makes a very good TED talk about this. Mm-hmm. She talks about the importance of sleep to be successful. She said, I literally slept my way to the top.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah, that's an example of, I think, human culture has advanced so much quicker than human biology has allowed for.
Right.
And we're coming to a bit of a cultural head. Luckily, it seems like with things like that, and just more of a culture of wellness and mindfulness and responsibility to ourselves as mm-hmm. as an organism, mm-hmm. that's changing. But the amount of stress that, not just in America, worldwide, we've placed upon ourselves societally and culturally, particularly in the working environment. If you look at it from a certain perspective or long enough, it feels so counterintuitive to health. Just full stop.
Yeah, well-being, Yeah. And so what we've started to do is we've started to kind of plug the gaps with these, meditation apps or, mm-hmm. Just personal improvement, self-improvement. Mm-hmm. But we haven't reduced the workload. We're now just like filling the little, I've only got like, I see my therapist at 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday.
God, I can't remember my own name.
You imagine like trying to get my head right for that moment.
Let me just crack up my morning with talking,
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I really feel like it's just like Don't Look Up, isn't it? I mean, really the whole thing is now playing out in real life.
Yeah, and I think, again, I have my misgivings with that movie. I could have anxiety dreams all by myself. Thank you, Adam McKay.
Yeah.
But that sense of hopelessness, I think, represents, to me, when it's at its worst. In those moments, as much as there were some hopeful perspectives, like in the summer of 2020 with protests and riots for justified reasons, and the discourse that became so convoluted so quickly as to what anybody was trying to accomplish or talk about that mm-hmm. we ended up talking ourselves in circles. And I think, speaking to the idea of, finding these little moments to try to take care of ourselves, even then, the focus is so specifically on improvement. The idea of chasing the car, of being better and being more productive and efficient and effective, that there's no think space allowed, or we don't allow ourselves to think space, at least in this country, to just be. And like the idea that relaxing is like fine or good or acceptable until people have a complete break. And that's what we saw over the pandemic. All of a sudden the wheel was taken away and everybody freaked out.
I like to think that people have learned from that. And they can be like, something, I don't need to work as crazy as I did before.
Yeah.
The problem is that people are working at home, and so they're invariably doing more hours because they're so, they're near their laptop all the time. And invariably, if the phone rings or the text goes or the email goes, then people tend to reply straight away.
Yeah, it can get gross.
And people don't say I'm off duty. And then, of course, like us, we're working across multiple time zones. And people don't respect the fact that it's like 3 o'clock in the morning for you, bombarding you with stuff, And I find that very interesting. I enjoy being part of a global community. But somebody, sometimes, somewhere, has to get some sleep.
Yes. And I'm lucky. I have arranged my life to this point where I have ample time for the things I need to do that aren't related to, work necessarily. Yeah. And it is shocking to consider just a few years ago when I had first moved to Los Angeles and was just hustling from job to job, trying to figure out, one, what I was doing, and two, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to do it. Even now, a few years beyond, I look back and go, who was that person and how did they make it? Because
Yeah, I'm the same. I think about the hustling, the years of excessive hustling and grifting and grafting and just relentless.
Yeah.
But, you have to be young to do that, so your naivety kind of supports that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
you wait till you get to 40, Travis. I'm telling you, you're going to become such a misery. It's wonderful. You've still got that youthful 30-something exuberance. You hit the 40 wall, oh my goodness. Life-changing.
I'm looking forward to it in its own right. It seems like a time in its own. I've been lucky to know a lot of neat older people from when I was very young, and I can point to at least one person in every decade that I can call up in memory and be like, that seems like fun. They seem like they were having fun.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of youthful energy. I don't, I stopped aging at like 32, I think. In my mind and physically, I stopped aging at 32. I mean, I look fantastic.
Yeah.
Considering that I'm 63. And I really feel like we have to, the secret to being healthy as an older person, male or female, is to not eat. That's the secret.
Just at all.
Just eat like a bird, just like little things. But just eating like this gross American diet, it's just going to make you ill. It's going to make you so ill and so uncomfortable, and your knees will stop working, and your back will get bad, and your diabetes will set in, and before you know it, you've really like ruined yourself. This is when you see like slim older people walking down the street, they don't look old. That's the secret.
I think you're onto something. If nothing else but for the inflammatory load that we place on our digestive system when we ask it to digest whatever it is. If it's a massive meal at 2 p.m. and then another one at 6 or 9 or whatever,
right.
You're just asking your body to do just get in the ring and fight this food.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore. I'm 30. I can't do that anymore. If I eat past 8 p.m., I sleep like garbage.
Yeah, I'm the same. I ate too late last night. But then again, I ran out of food. Well, I didn't run out of food. I was too tired to make anything, so I ended up having oatmeal for dinner. Is that a bad thing? I mean, not really. It's very good for you.
Yeah.
It's
all right.
Fills you up.
It's all contextual, What'd you have before that day? What are you going to have the next day? Because, there's something to the idea that every sleep and every day is a new cycle for our body, but also it's important to consider the context of a week, a month, a year, especially when you have no choice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't sleep great. But I mean, I tend to do catch-ups, I tend to medicate once or twice a week and then try and sleep for much longer. And by much longer, I mean like 8 hours as opposed to the 5 hours that I've been getting typically.
I did 5 last night, and I am on the struggle. But this is why I didn't want to go half screen.
I can see it. Your eyes look like 2 little pee-pee holes in the snow.
Yeah, last night around 10:30 p.m. as I was wrapping up some work, because again, my work hours can be distorted due to working from home. A friend of mine asked if I could plant sit, and I said, sure. And what they meant was help them move.
What?
Yeah. They had a emergency falling out. Them and one of the roommates had an emergency falling out with their roommate that was the leaseholder, and had to get out of Dodge right quick. And to their credit, she really did just ask me to grab the plants. But there's a certain kind of situation you arrive at where, you know, if you're there to deliver a pizza and someone's having a heart attack, you kind of want to call the ambulance.
Well, you need to eat the pizza first, and then you call the ambulance, you know.
Yeah, so I
Because obviously there's going to be a spare pizza.
Yeah, you can't have that.
No.
It's going to get cold. So I put on my friend hat and helped him move from Sawtell to downtown real quick.
That's good. What a good person you are.
Trying my best.
Did you put them in the back of your crap car?
I put all their stuff, and then we had just enough room for them to sit in the passenger seat, because that was the thing. They don't have a car.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it was they're in a real spot.
That's hard. I went and bought a coffee table the other day from some guys that were selling it, and it was a kind of big, heavy thing. And they very kindly carried it into my car.
Oh.
And then when I got to my place, I realized that how was I going to get it out of my car and up the stairs on my own?
So is there still a coffee table in your car?
No, I did it. I did it by myself.
Wow. Congratulations.
It's like marble and like the whole thing. And
God.
I nearly died. Literally nearly died. But, you know, this kind of, you know, you've got to have this wrought iron determination.
Yeah. That's
very important.
That's our greatest strength and potentially our greatest endangerment as a species is humans just have this sense of like, nah, this is happening.
Yeah.
We're going to do this.
Yeah. That you're right. Yeah. Whereas the animal kingdom, they're like, no.
Yeah.
No, we're not
they know their limits a bit more.
We don't need coffee tables, they say. You know?
What can a coffee table give me that the ground could not?
Yeah, especially if you're a praying mantis. I mean, it really is just completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But still, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I feel your pain. I'm very tired, and I also have like a whole bunch of work to do today. You know, when I finish this show, I have to do another show. You know, like straight away. Yeah.
Oh no.
An hour.
Live also, or do you get to pre-record it?
Pre-recorded, yeah.
Okay.
So it's you know, I have to kind of wipe the sleep. This show is like a kind of warm-up. Just kind of wakes me up, you know, gets me ready for the next one. It's like, man, what do we do to ourselves?
Survive.
Do you have any downtime today? You're going to get rest that little face of yours?
I'm looking to manufacture some. I have something that I have a deliverable that's not on a deadline, but I said by the end of Friday, after we're done here, I plan to get in touch with my coordinator and say, remember what I said Friday? That's Saturday. We're
Saturday,
not. Yeah.
I think Saturday is as good a day as any day.
Just fine. So yeah, I plan to send that email and then just get horizontal and see what happens, you know?
Well, I recommend you put on the PBS documentary about the election, because it's quite a good thing to watch if you're kind of lying there, you know, wanting to doze.
Nice.
You know, I always need something on, you know?
Likewise.
And it's a frontline documentary, and I do love a frontline documentary. I do think it's some of the best journalism on American television, for sure. And yet, you know, again, it's polarized, though, isn't it? You know, the Republicans, they don't like to watch PBS. They think of it as being too, you know, well, true, and that's not something they can cope with.
Too disagreeable to their reality, to put it kindly. But yeah, and I think, you know, something we touched on yesterday, the functionality and the quality of PBS and NPR, you know, not that this reaches any kind of ears that could change things, but it speaks to the benefit of having media that is affiliated with the state and the culture, like the BBC.
The BBC. Yeah. Talking of England, there was a controversy in the last couple of days. Boris Johnson talking about gay conversion therapy and various things.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean the guy is nuts. You know,
Uh-oh.
he's nuts. So a Conservative member of Parliament has released a statement because there was a thing about trans conversion therapy and like a whole Boris Johnson was getting himself into a bit of a twist. So this Conservative MP, who's one of Boris Johnson's people, albeit he is Welsh, he dropped a statement yesterday admitting that he is trans, that he, what he's been through as a trans man. He's not what do you call it? Like, I was going to say crossed over. He's not living as a woman. Transitioned. Thank you. He's not transitioned, but he wants to. And about the horrors that he got involved with. He got blackmailed by somebody, and they had photographs of him, and they demanded £50,000 to not show the photographs. And then he went on a date with a guy, and the guy attacked him, and he got, I won't go too much into the specifics, but it was very explicit. And he wrote all of this in a statement, and then he crashed his car and fled the scene.
Oh, God.
And was he... right, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse for this poor guy.
No.
And anyway, so he's published it, and he just said, it's time. I need to talk about my truth. And off the back of that, Boris Johnson has reversed his decision to kind of support trans conversion therapy.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But it's just very interesting that everybody has a secret, and in this guy's case, multiple secrets. But it's like this statement was insane because I was thinking, could an American conservative congressman put out a statement that said I'm trans, I was blackmailed for photos of me dressed up as a woman, I was attacked and raped effectively, and then crashed my car and fled the scene, all in one statement, admitting it, just to kind of make the point that this is a reality and this is what the right wing are kind of campaigning against with their anti-trans sentiment, that this is the reality for people of how difficult it is to live. I mean, this guy's clearly in his 40s and he's not transitioned, because, he's living in a society that still doesn't afford him the opportunity to be himself.
It's
or herself.
That would be all consideration of personal well-being aside.
Yeah.
Situationally, that would be one of the most interesting things I think that could happen in political discourse at this very moment. If someone that is a conservative were to come out, and say that they're transitioning, everything that you listed there, my mind cannot wrap around the idea of what would ensue.
Yeah. The guy's name is Jamie Wallace, and he posted this yesterday. And he's a Welsh conservative, and bless him, bless him, Jamie Wallace MP. And what's so interesting to me is that he didn't just hint at it, as would happen in America. He basically spilt all of the beans.
Wow.
And I think it's wonderful, and I wrote to congratulate him. Huh. I just feel like, and also, it was a celebration of was it trans
visibility, internet trans visibility day.
Trans visibility day, that's right. Yeah. So, this is what has to happen now, especially as the likes of Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott and all of these people who claim to be celebrating freedom are removing people's freedoms, stamping on people's rights to choose, to be whoever they want to be. It's very interesting to me. So, how do we qualify one with the other? It's crazy.
I think the most important tool that we're going to have, regardless of whether we anticipate it or not, is time. I'm lucky to have people in my life that are trans or non-binary, because you live in Los Angeles, you get in the arts, you just meet people of all, the most.
Yeah, it's the same in London. I grew up amongst hookers and drug dealers and trannies. That was my whole childhood. I have a photograph of an uncle who who has transitioned and wears the worst wigs now. I mean, he just literally looks like he's gone to one of those fancy dress shops, and grabbed one of those synthetic polyester yellow wigs. And I'm just like, I said to him, you can do better than this.
The technology.
You really can do better than this.
I think there's something to that, because I think something that I have no firsthand experience with, but I've heard firsthand accounts of in the LGBT plus community, is that people tend to exist within the confines of their time socially.
Yeah.
Like if someone were to live as a trans man or woman, whether out or not, they tend to carry the same resources and social ideas of what they're allowed to do into, the only thing that was like a demarcation point was when marriage was allowed, in the United States or various states. But otherwise, I feel it seems to me, or at least the feedback I've gotten is that as new generations arise, they seem to be the ones that can realize the new freedoms they have, and it almost feels like a relay where each new generation of people that are pushing these ideas and what's accepted at the culture at large further, they pick up the baton and see how far they can go with it. Because to the point now, I remember at a party at my house, I have a friend who is gay, and he was surveying another group of friends that were at the party who were, they're probably about 6-7 years younger than us, in their early 20s. And with all the love of my heart, I say this: I don't think there's a gender between the four of them. They are so truthful in how they choose to live and how they identify within themselves, and as they explore the idea of who they are and what it means to be who they are, they just don't, they don't have any regard for what people expect them to be on like a gender identity level. And it's just an incredible concept, because even when I was growing up in the early 2000s, it was a binary. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous to consider being the other one. And now there's these spaces in between where it's whatever. Not to say it's whatever you want, but it's...
Well, it's just being afforded the opportunity to not have to fit into one of those two categories.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, I understand that. I was like ridiculed by my father in my childhood because I was, into girl things when I was a boy. And even though I was straight, I've always been into what, typically less male things. And he called me Mary, that was my nickname, he just completely demolished any sense of respect I had for myself because it didn't fit his ideal, And so, I turned to show business, and I guess that's kind of what people do, that's why show business is like this home of waifs and strays, because fundamentally it's the most welcoming of the industries. It was the first industry to welcome, people who didn't identify in a traditional fashion.
Yeah, and to the point where if you go far back enough, that's just the color of their skin.
Right. And so we are, we're always, I've never needed to search for anything. I've always been very comfortable in who I am. But I guess if I was to analyze it from externally, I do not fit any traditions. I don't, like I wear what's it called? An LA Dodgers hat, the blue one.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that's the LA Dodgers. I just thought it was an LA hat, Los Angeles hat, because I'm not a sports person. I'm an artist. And so, I get these very machismo guys in Ralph's kind of wanting to have a conversation with me about a ball game, and I don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, no.
You see the game last night? Sorry? A game? You see the game last night? What game? Well, you're wearing a Dodgers hat. This is a Dodgers hat? And then I suddenly feel like they're my father, like diminishing my masculinity. Welcome to my life, Travis. How's it going for you?
No, you bring up a very important point, which I think we can even tie in with the idea of not understanding how smarter our brains and our experiences and our history is than our current conscious moment. That was a weird sentence. What I mean to say is we can have these situations where someone says, "Did you see the ball game?" And one, you may not know, whatever. There's all the mistaken identity of I'm a sports fan and wearing this hat. I'm just wearing the hat. Yeah. But also those moments where people say things like that, and it speaks to such a specific part of you that in terms of your ability to hang with it or to process or be, anything, to participate in that, you may not start at like a 1 for I can tolerate this. You may start at like an 8 for just like I have this much room for this, for what you're saying to me, because of all the association I have with what sports mean to me emotionally, or what the idea of masculine practices and pastimes mean to me. It's something I've been really fascinated with recently. It's just the human response and how we can have conditioned responses based on things that we don't think about anymore that happened to us long ago. And I guess that's the end of that point. But sorry that happened.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm kind of used to it now.
All right, right on.
That's the reality, isn't it, of being yourself and living innocently as yourself.
Yeah.
You can wear an LA Dodgers hat and have no clue of the image that you are projecting of yourself. This is the modern humanity. This is where we live. This is who we are, Travis. I'll be honest, I don't really know who I am, and I certainly don't know who you are.
That's the fun part. That's what's fascinating. Is that certainty can turn on a dime, seemingly, in any moment.
Yeah, I agree.
But not to invite you to live against your truth. But if anyone comes at you again, you can just tell them, look, Dave called the World Series. Seems like a stretch, but I can't fault that confidence.
Okay, I'll memorize that line.
Yeah, there you go.
And see if I can pull that off.
Yeah, and then just walk away as fast as you can.
Just walk away.
Just walk away.
Yeah, and say, could you tell me where the gherkins are, please?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. There is a kind of interesting machismo that I'm learning about here in LA. I'm sure it's the same across the country. But I've always enjoyed. I don't know about you, where you sit on the machismo scale. I'd probably put you at about a 6. But I think that
out of what?
Out of what? But I kind of feel like it just seems very old school now, very antiquated. This kind of machismo. Attitude, behavior, and character. And obviously we see it a lot on the right, this kind of aggressive, men should be men, women should be women, there should be no crossover, men should marry women, women should marry men, women should be grateful that men are marrying them. I mean, it's like, what? Hello? Rewind.
Grateful.
Well, that's the whole, tragically, that's, what we're dealing with. And Donald Trump really epitomized that, didn't he? He was somebody who just took what he wanted whenever he wanted and didn't care of the consequences, of how many victims there were. I was reading today, who's it he stiffed now? There was a really funny article this morning about, who was it? Oh yeah, that's right. It was the official photographer at the White House. He basically never paid her. Never credited her.
Oh, God.
And has put out like a whole bunch of coffee table books all about his presidency. And
throughout his entire damn life.
Literally stiffs everybody.
Everybody.
Right? It's just incredible.
No wonder he's popular with landlords.
Yeah, you are, you see. Dexter's joined us. Tony, Ronnie, Brenda. First time on the show, Brenda from Michigan. Thank you. Jolie, Fresh Pigeon. And Stacey says, you shouldn't eat too late at night. It's good advice, I made the mistake of, do you ever go to Trader Joe's? Is that one of yours? I see you more as a kind of one type of person, but do you ever go to Trader Joe's?
First of all, thank you, I think. Or maybe, hey, I don't know. But yes, Trader Joe's is my grocery store of choice. It's quite close, and I used to work there, so there's a bit of
good. Which one, the Crescent one or the Santa Monica one?
I go to the Westchester Trader Joe's by the airport.
Oh, the Westchester, that's right. You mean there's more than 2 Trader Joe's in Los Angeles?
Let me tell you, this is where it happened. This is ground zero for Trader Joe's. There is a Trader Joe's practically on every street corner.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I started buying a pound of chocolate. Have you seen that they sell for $4.99? A pound of Belgium chocolate with almonds in it. Well, I only bought it 2 days ago. There's not much left. I seem to have got through £1 in 2 days. Why do they make it so cheap?
That's the problem, because that's the bit of Trader Joe's, is when you manufacture your own brand of products, you can keep margins lower than the traditional grocery store. I don't work there anymore. Why am I saying this?
How was it working there? I hear the culture is very good. Was it a good place to work?
It is. I worked when I was in the Bay Area, store number 123, Walnut Creek, California. And like any job where the place itself can be like a bit of a social ecosystem, you can have the managers you like, the managers you dislike. There's a little bit of political back and forth. That's just working anywhere. But in terms of like a service industry job or a grocery job, they tend to treat you, at least face value, with the most personal respect. They do try to make it seem like you are a individual store, not just one location in the context of, a multinational corporation or a national corporation. But I will say, it does inspire you to work hard, which is good, because good Lord, you work there.
Really?
Yeah, they run tight margins, tight crews, and every hour or so they have you switched off doing everything. So what's great is you develop a competency pretty quick. So if you wanted to go into a career in grocery, which is good for you if you do, great place to learn a whole bunch of stuff at once.
Right.
However, it's exhausting. It's absolutely
So you're saying
exhausting.
every hour, if you're working on checkout for 1 hour, then they'll move you after an hour onto something completely different.
Yep, there's
They just keep rotating you.
major food groups. You could be on checkout. You can be in frozen restocking. Checkouts are usually 2 hours, because that's the long haul. That's the most important part. You'll be out wrangling carts. That's a blast. You'll be, switching facing, which is that's the best. You just go around the store aisle to aisle, making sure everything is at the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everything is at the front, including £1 of chocolate, which
Yes.
was the reason why I bought £2 of chocolate.
Oh, good. At least you got a backup.
$9.98. It's very interesting. Anyway, it's a wonderful store.
I'm partial to this guy myself.
Yeah, I've seen that stuff. I don't really like that, to be honest.
It's been a
quiet
slippery
taste.
slope. It's been a slippery slope.
I'm sure.
I never meant to end up here, but here I am.
No, it's fine. The whole experience of shopping in the US is so different to getting groceries in England. It's just so different. Well, for a start, we don't have brown paper bags. I mean, that's not a thing. They don't exist. There's no brown bags in any grocery store.
Is there a different color? What do you guys do? You juggle them out of the store?
You have thin plastic bags.
Mm.
So like the heavy bags, the heavy like a brown Ralph's bag, don't have those. You have a thin that you could screw up and it would be so small. So you're basically carrying very precariously your groceries that could fall out the bag at any time. And they'll charge you, for each bag, as they do here. But it's not just that. It's the fact that you don't interact outside of what's necessary.
Interesting.
So if you're checking out, there won't be a conversation. It'll just be bip, 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 bip. They don't pack it. You have to pack it. They would never pack your groceries in the UK ever. Some of the larger supermarkets might employ a kid to do some packing, just like a student doing some extra work, in which case they'll pack, but they're going to pack so slowly. You're like, just give it to me, right? So there's none of that efficiency and there's none of that personality or that connection. It's just like you go to the grocery store to get your groceries and then you go, And there isn't. And when I first came to LA, and I had my daughter with me, and I went to Rock and Roll Ralph's on Sunset Boulevard.
Ooh.
The guy, I was with my daughter, and she was in the car. She was like 1 at the time, and the checkout guy is doing Elmo voices, like really good Elmo. Like it could have been Elmo. And I was like, this is wonderful. Like, this does not exist where I come from. Like, if you did a voice, like a silly voice or a characterful voice, I don't know that you would get fired, but, like, it just goes so against the culture of what you're there for. It's a very impersonal country, England. There's none of this kind of I do get a sense in America, or certainly in Los Angeles, that we're all the same. You're a human, I'm a human, you know? And when I first went to a restaurant in Silver Lake, and I think my wife was wearing a band T-shirt, and the waitress, the server, first thing she said is, "I love that band. I went to see them in..." And I was like, whoa! The server spoke to the customer about something that wasn't on the menu. It just blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's so culturally different, Travis. So different. Servers in England, you don't talk. You don't talk.
Interesting. Is there a culture of gratuity? Is there, because that's the whole thing. There's a bit of
no gratuity.
Okay. So I think
But there is hierarchy.
Oh, okay.
So the customer is here, the server is here.
Oh.
And in LA, my experience is the customer and the server sit at the same place. You're a person, I'm a person. You want to eat, I bring you food. I'd be nice
that's a
to
really
you,
good point.
you tip me well. But we're the same, fundamentally. When I'm not a server, I'm a regular person, just like you. Whereas in England, because we have the class system, lower class, middle class, upper class, the working class, and it's all class-based. And so because being a server is a working class job, you would assume that the patron is a more superior class because they can afford to eat out, and therefore, I mean, it's tragic that I'm having to say all this stuff out loud because it so goes against my, very being. And so the customer is considered to be the king, and you respect the king, and you don't speak out of turn to the king, and you don't speak. So, and I guess if I was to talk to a server in England, then they would have license to respond, but brief. They can't change the subject. They have to only respond directly to the question that I've given them. So if I say, "I like your shoes," they say, "Thank you so much, sir." And that's it. They can't say, "I like your shoes too." Do you see what I mean? Because that's like instigating something.
Oh, goodness.
Or "I like your sweatshirt." You can't do any of that. I hope you're enjoying this education on how screwed up my country of birth is.
I am, and it's helping me to appreciate, because there's a certain point where I think in America we can be a little cynical and look at it through, well, this is all just an entrepreneurial lens. But I think there is really something special, particularly in this area of Los Angeles, of what you said, human-to-human interaction. Yeah. Everybody here, because, look, it's the middle of the desert. We wouldn't be living here unless there was a good reason. Like, we live in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
So
or Mr. Mulholland hadn't piped water from the top of a mountain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with that, I think there's a greater sense of like you said, everybody here is trying to do something that may not be the thing they're actively doing. And if it is, good for them. But there's a certain amount of respect, because not that you never know who you're talking to, but I think there's for as busy and loud and chaotic as Los Angeles is, there is a sense of community and living in LA that I do appreciate.
I think that this is probably the most wonderful city in the world. I really mean that. It's not old, doesn't have the architecture or the history that a lot of other cities do, but it does have a spirit to it. It doesn't have a center, it doesn't have a cultural center, doesn't have an economic center. It's all spread out. It's just a series of suburbs, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm telling you. You live here.
Oh, no.
But but in England it's not like that. We have the center of London, the nucleus of London, and then everything's kind of wrapped around it and wrapped around it and wrapped around it and wrapped around it. And so, wherever you go, there'll be a sign saying London 50 miles.
I see.
No, it doesn't always say 50 miles. It depends on how far you are from London.
So does that caste system also extend to where you live, in the sense of,
yes,
if you're if you're to be not from London, and
if you said you lived in Croydon, then I would judge you. So people tend to lie a little bit about where they are. So if they're in Croydon, they might say they were in Esher, which is a nicer part of Surrey. The county of Surrey. And so south is considered south of London has the river running through the middle of it. You live on the south side of the river, you are considered to be of lower class to people that live on the north side of the river.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's such a spirit of luck of the draw that I think exists in those Western European countries that really come down to where were you born? Oh, you won. Good for you. Or, you lost. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's going to be an uphill climb.
Yeah.
Which, that happens.
I mean, the other thing is that we can move. You know, I do find it interesting. It's a bit like people that live near the airport and complain about airport noise. Do you know what I mean? You know, like airplane noise.
Have I complained? What?
No, you're right there. But I mean, it's a big thing in England. People complain about being near Heathrow Airport.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like Heathrow Airport's been there since like 1930. And these people have been there since 1970, you know, and they're just like, the noise is insane. It's like, well, you live near an airport, just move. Like, go anywhere. And they won't, you know, they just will not go.
Yeah. Oh, that's my favorite part. I do appreciate people that, whether they know it or not, are playing a specific role, you know, or they have a cause, and it's like, no, that's sort of important to the core of their being, whether or not they recognize it or not. If they didn't live near an airport, who would they be?
Candace Owens, who's this terrible right-wing commentator, I don't know if you're aware of her. She's a very beautiful black woman, very eloquent, but she's completely nuts. She just tweeted this. There is no 5-year-old in the world that is explicitly gay, lesbian, transgender, or heterosexual. Small children do not think about sex and sexuality unless they have been groomed to do so by an adult. These are the facts.
Okay, Candace.
And she has 3 million followers. 3 million. You know, this is what you're up against. She posted this, 38 minutes. When was it? 15 hours ago. It just came up on my feed. Yes. She's had 33,000 retweets. And a lot of people underneath are celebrating her and saying, yep. You know, I would love to say to her, did you choose to be heterosexual? You know, when did you choose? Oh, well, I didn't. Well, that's because you were always that way. You know, since before you were 5.
God, it's so difficult these days when people are allowed to, oh no, not allowed. It's hard to say, because there's this idea that in the before times, quote unquote, in a pre-social media era, when we had a specific number of news outlets, there's a danger in that too, because there's sort of this all-encompassing, one could argue, bland or unnuanced way to cover news that could leave a lot to the imagination in terms of like detail and motivation. But there's also the danger of where we're at now, where there's hyper exposure of everybody's opinion all the time, where people can just pick their own lighthouse in terms of what to follow and things like that, which is, we could always have done that. But now it's almost expected to, all right, everybody pick your teams and let's fight until we're dead.
It's tragic, isn't it? That's like how people choose to think, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's a shame. It's a real shame. And it, doesn't quell my general optimism for us as a species continuing on and the world being generally fine-ish, but it certainly doesn't make me think that we're going to have a real opportunity to solve problems that we're going to need to solve together anytime soon, whether it be climate or population or anything like that. It's like, if we can't even, the horse isn't even out of the gate.
Yeah.
If we're arguing over the consciousness of the sexual identity of 5-year-olds and whether just like, I
couldn't have put it better myself.
I appreciate that. It's like a kitchen fire. It's so bad. Oh no.
Limitless Crane has dropped in. It's hard to tell whether these people this is their real names. They just had really kind of extravagant parents, or whether this is part of the service. Keith and Squealing Otter and Hunter and Dexter and Tony, and thank you everybody. Ronnie and Brenda. Should we do the US news update and then I'll come back and do some more of the news? Would you be up for that, Travis? Okay, this is a daily podcast that I put out, and you can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Here it is. It's Friday, April 1. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. President Joe Biden on Thursday launched the largest release ever from the US Emergency Oil Reserve and challenged oil companies to drill more in an attempt to bring down gasoline prices that have soared during Russia's war with Ukraine. The announcement comes as part of a broad effort by Biden to tackle raging inflation that has hurt US consumers and threatens Biden's fellow Democrats as they seek to maintain control of Congress in the November elections. Starting in May, the United States will release 1 million barrels per day of crude oil for 6 months from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is a moment of consequence and peril for the world and pain at the pump for American families, Biden said at an event at the White House. It's also a moment of patriotism, as he asked oil company executives to serve their customers and American families instead of the investors they've rewarded with billions of dollars in dividends. Biden's 180 million barrel release is equivalent to about 2 days of global demand and marks the third time Washington has tapped the SPR in the past 6 months. Biden also called on US oil companies to drill more and for boosts in production of electric vehicles and batteries. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, made a valuable appearance on Thursday before the U.S. House of Representatives committee investigating the January 6 riot at the U.S. Capitol. Kushner is the first close relative of the former president known to have spoken to the House Select Committee. He also served as a senior advisor in the Trump White House. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. There it is, the US News Update. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Anthony Davis, 18 minutes after 10 here on the West Coast, 18 minutes after 1 Eastern. Hal's here at 2 Eastern, so you can spend some time with him. Daniel's joined us. Hello, Daniel. Fair Rattlesnake, Jonathan, Choice Peacock, Keith, and Limitless Crane in Florida. Nice to know that you're part of the show. We've been looking through the morning papers and working out what's going on. What is going on? Do you ever think that? You're just like, what is going on? US jobs rise again as firms raise wages. They raise wages to woo staff. Yes, US employers added 431,000 jobs last month as the American economy continued to rebound from the shock of the coronavirus pandemic. The figures from the Labor Department marked the 15th month in a row of job gains and helped to push the unemployment rate down to 3.6%. Bars, restaurants, hotels were among the businesses leading the hiring last month. The US has now regained nearly all the jobs lost since the pandemic hit. Faced with the tight labor market, businesses are paying more to woo workers. Well, the average weekly wage in March was up 5.6% from a year ago, the Labor Department said. However, those gains continue to lag inflation, which hit 7.9% in February, a 40-year high. So it's very interesting, isn't it? My Trump-supporting landlord said to me yesterday, he said that employment was far better under Trump and black employment as well. And I just said, that's just not true, Gary. It's just not true. Because Trump says it does not mean it's true. LGBT groups sue Florida over the so-called Don't Say Gay law. This is gay rights advocates suing Ron DeSantis yesterday to block a new law that forbids classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Well, the law has catapulted Florida and DeSantis, a potential 2024 Republican presidential candidate, to the forefront of the country's culture wars. Critics call it the Don't Say Gay law and argue that its true intent is to marginalize LGBTQ plus people and their families. Well, the challenge, filed in federal court in Tallahassee on behalf of Equality Florida and Family Equality, alleges that the law violates the constitutionally protected rights of free speech, equal protection and due process of students and families. This effort to control young minds through state censorship and to demean LGBTQ lives by denying their reality is a grave abuse of power. the lawsuit says. Well, the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed the LGBTQ people and their families are at home in our constitutional order. The state of Florida has no right to declare them outcasts or to treat their allies as outlaws by punishing schools where someone dares to affirm their identity and dignity, the lawsuit says. The law deliberately employs broad terms and invites arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, empowering parents to be roving censors who can sue boards for damages based on any perceived violation, the lawsuit adds. The law states classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through third grade or in a manner that is not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Parents would be able to sue districts over violations. This is so serious. This is so serious. And this kind of plays into what this lunatic Candace Owens has been saying, this message that I just talked about. There's no 5-year-old in the world that is explicitly gay, lesbian, transgender, or heterosexual. Small children do not think about sex and sexuality unless they have been groomed to do so by an adult, she says. She's wrong. She's just wrong. It's just not true. There is no evidence for that whatsoever. And grooming, who would talk about grooming with a child? My point is, and I said to Travis, if you are straight, there is no point in your life where you choose to be straight. Something, I think I'm going to be straight. Your sexuality is a natural phenomenon along with your gender, and your gender might be the wrong gender for your body. You don't choose that. That's how you are born. You are born in the wrong body, and consequently, there will come a point when you are a little older, some say 4, or 3, or 4, or 5, that you will know. You will just know. You didn't make a choice. Nobody groomed you. Candace Owens' husband, incidentally, is the man who is behind Parler, which is the right-wing messaging app. Yes, gay rights advocates sued Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Thursday to block the new law that forbids classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. They're saying that the U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona met with LGBTQ students and their family members at a school in Orlando on Thursday, discussing privately how the legislation is affecting their lives. Cardona's visit was one of several Biden administration events on Thursday showing support for the queer community, including a presidential proclamation recognizing Transgender Day of Visibility. We know that while many transgender students experience valuable support at school, many others face significant challenges because of hostility directed at them by others. Cardona said this includes a growing number of state laws that bully and intimidate LGBTQI students and their families. DeSantis and other Republicans have repeatedly described the rules as reasonable, saying children should learn about sexual orientation and gender identity from their parents and not in schools. He said, "We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not an indoctrination," the governor said when he signed it into law last week. Many critics have said the law's language, particularly the phrases classroom instruction and age appropriate, could be interpreted so broadly that discussion in any grade could trigger lawsuits, creating a classroom atmosphere where teachers would avoid the subjects entirely. This is not going to turn out well. Somebody is going to die. That's what's going to happen. Shirley is in Virginia. Welcome to the show. Snazzy Guinea Pig, welcome. Nutty Crab is in as well. And Stacey is chatting, I think, with Daniel. She said there's another way you can get reviews into Backchannel. Yes, I think you just go to backchannel.tv and you can leave a review there. It's backchannel.tv. Jonathan's here. Choice Peacock, Keith, Limitless Crane, Squealing Otter, Hunter, Dexter, Tony, Ronnie and Brenda, Jolie and Fresh Pigeon, Judy Wright and Flimsy Dinosaur, Stupendous Mosquito and John. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Backchannel. 10:26 here on the West Coast, 1:26 Eastern. I'm Anthony Davis. This is the Anthony Davis Show. We are looking at the Don't Say Gay bill, which of course was signed into law, and now DeSantis is being sued. They said that while He said DeSantis and other Republicans have repeatedly described the rules as reasonable. Intense backlash followed the bill's introduction in Florida Republican-controlled legislature this year. The White House, Hollywood celebrities, students, Democrats, LGBTQ advocates condemning the policy. Legal challenges have been expected, they say. Well, is it any wonder? Is it any wonder? And then finally, there's this interesting story about the Pope. You know the Pope. Everybody loves the Pope. Where is it? Here we go. It's Pope Francis. He has made an historic apology to Indigenous peoples for the deplorable abuses they suffered in Canada's Catholic-run residential schools. Francis, in an address to Indigenous leaders after meeting with Métis, Inuit and First Nations delegates, also said that he hoped to visit Canada in July. Of the leaders who want the Pope to make the apology directly to their communities on their native lands in Canada, called his words historic, and another said they reflected the entirety of their message to him. From the deplorable behavior of those members of the Catholic Church, I ask forgiveness from God, and I would like to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I am very pained, he said, speaking in Italian. I join my brother Canadian bishops in apologizing. He said the speech was the Vatican's frescoed Sala Clementina, was preceded by prayers by Indigenous leaders in native languages asking the Great Spirit to bless all those present. They said the Pope's words today were historic, to be sure. They were necessary, and I appreciate them deeply, said Cassida Karen, the president of the Métis National Council and head of one of the Indigenous delegations. I now look forward to the Pope's visit to Canada. Yes, about 150,000 children were taken from their homes. Many were subjected to abuse, rape and malnutrition in what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015 called cultural genocide. And this is, it's a huge subject, and I know it's a lot, to kind of take in. But the stated aim of the schools, which operated between 1831 and 1996, was to assimilate Indigenous children. They were run by Christian denominations, most by the Catholic Church, on behalf of the government. I feel shame, sorrow and shame for the role that a number of Catholics, particularly those with educational responsibilities, had in all these things that wounded you, in the abuses that you suffered, the lack of respect shown for your identity, your culture, and even your spiritual values, Francis said. He also spoke of unresolved traumas that have become intergenerational traumas. He told the Indigenous people that he was happy to know that Catholics among them were devoted to St. Anne, the Mother of Mary. This year, I would like to be with you on that day, he said. I won't come in the winter. The scandal erupted last year with the discovery of the remains of 215 children at the former Indian residential school in Kamloops in the Western Canadian province of British Columbia, which closed in 1978. The fine brought fresh demands for accountability. Hundreds more unmarked burial sites have been identified since. So, yeah, there it is. That's the reality of the Catholic Church and how it has its jurisdiction spread so far that it was just not being overseen, And Pope Francis says that he would like to visit Canada in July and extend his apology to First Nations communities. So there it is. It's just interesting. Travis, you there? Do you want to talk about the Pope? There's a very good film called The Two Popes, which I can highly recommend. I really wasn't kind of in the mood for The Two Popes, and I watched it, and I was like, wow. It was Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins playing Pope Francis, that Pope there that we're talking about, and the previous one, who was called Benedict, I think. Pope Benedict. Yeah.
Pope Benedict, the only Pope, well, not the only Pope, but one of the only popes in recent memory to say, you know what, I'm done.
I'm done. Well, that's what the film is about. Have you seen the film?
I've seen the film intermittently. I got my grandparents to watch it a few years back, and they had a great time with it, and I caught maybe about a third of it, give or take.
It's a very good film. It's a very good film. Surprisingly good. I'll tell you what's really interesting about it, is that most of it was shot on green screen.
Huh.
And you watch it, and you see them in the Vatican, and you see them in these incredible ornate palaces and churches, and there was a company, I think, called Frame Store, I think, in England that did all the kind of, the mats and the scenic art for it, and I watched a kind of expose video of how it was all done, and it's just brilliant. I mean, it's so convincing that they're in the Vatican, and the whole lot is just in the computer. It's all CGI.
It's near concerning how real, because there's, we think of CGI and
For
things like
action
that in
movies,
movies.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Of making the impossible feasible, but not making the real
Right.
just there. Yeah.
And it's the same with The Crown. I quite like The Crown. Have you watched The Crown?
That was actually on that same trip, I got my grandparents on The Crown and caught maybe about a third of it
Yeah.
over some seasons.
Well, again, all CGI, going into Buckingham Palace and
Really?
all these various places. And I was like, how do they do that? They build that set? Like, I can't work out, because I know these areas very well.
Sure.
All CGI.
That, among all the reasons to be astounded by it, from an acting perspective, that has always boggled my mind. The little acting I've done, I've been, in an environment that is at least somewhat familiar to the setting of what I'm supposed to be talking about. To have the theater of the mind, the capability to just act like you're in Buckingham Palace in front of a green screen or something like that is mind-boggling.
It's very clever. They're very good. And I mean, because they tend to build the physical sets of like of the local stuff. So like the most of the room, but it's normally when they're looking out of the window, or they go onto a balcony and they look out and they see, in the case of London, the Mall, and the thousands of cheering people looking on, and they're waving at them, and they're just waving at green screen, and it's so clever. And I was so sucked in by the narrative that I just didn't really consider the fact that most of it was probably just done in the computer.
Right. How was that show received with your countrymen? I'm curious.
Oh, they loved it.
Yeah?
They loved it, this is fundamentally, I think this is what people don't quite understand about England, is that there is this huge love of the royalty and the royal family. It's not like here, where the idea of having a king or a queen just seems so antiquated and so alien, and it's like, you couldn't force me to love the queen and it's like, in England, it's like, it's the opposite, because we don't see the queen as a threat, because she doesn't, it's just, she's a figurehead, she's head of state,
short.
but she's a figurehead. She doesn't make the rules.
That's
it's a democratic country.
And was that, this is a really obtuse and honestly ignorant question, but how long has England had a parliamentary system, give or take? Is it?
Since forever. I mean,
I'm curious. Yeah, I don't know the demarcation point from king having final say politically to parliament.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's always been like that,
No.
I mean, you have to go back a long, long way for it to not to be like that. But no, it's always been like that since.
Neat.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole point of it. It's like, it's a tradition, and they use some of the traditions from hundreds of years ago are still the same. The Order of the Garter, for example. If you were to look up the Order of the Garter, that will give you a signal as to how old the parliamentary system is.
Wow.
You can do it on your screen up there if you want, and then it'll give you a date. The Order of the Garter.
Order of the Garter. Done.
Right?
Yeah, put me to
You
work.
give me a date. I reckon it's going to be something like the 14th century or something.
Let's see.
Maybe the 15th century.
Founded by Edward III in 1348.
There you go. 14th century.
Good Lord.
Right?
The senior and oldest British order of chivalry. Nifty.
Huh.
Every year in June they do a procession. They've been having a parade since 1348.
I'm telling you, it goes. It's old. You know?
My God.
Yeah.
That's.
It's.
What do they ride? Dinosaurs? What is this?
Horses, I would say.
All right,
Horses rather than dinosaurs. I think just out by about 65 million years, but that's okay. I mean, the reality is that this is why the British parliamentary system, the British justice system, these are heralded as kind of great pillars and institutions, and it's because they've been around for so long.
That makes sense. It's interesting because I think there's a conception in America, because our culture is so new. We look at, for example, the Queen. It's like, well, if, when the Queen is gone, I mean, is there even going to be like a royal family anymore? It seems like that's sort of that's it. Like, what are they going to do? And
Well, who do you think was there before the Queen?
I don't know.
And before the King? And before that king was a queen? I mean, this is the point. It's like, I mean, Queen Victoria was one of the longest reigning monarchs. Most of which she was in mourning. You know about this? The loss of her husband meant that she wore black for literally like 30 years.
Yeesh.
She was furious. The Queen is getting smaller and smaller, though. She's now about that big.
You could put her in a thimble.
Her Majesty. Yeah. That big.
That's. Oh, she just shrank a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was sorry. I was caught in between the ether of wanting to make a wearing black for 30 years joke to you or not, because so far anytime I've seen you wearing a black Uniqlo t-shirt, which I can't fault because I wear the same thing. I haven't changed my style since I was in 8th grade.
I mean, I'm wearing a classic t-shirt. You've got some style.
But you're not in mourning though, are you?
No, but I just think that it's very slimming. And also, I just would never think to wear anything else because I don't have anything else, Travis. I open the drawer and I literally have 27 black Uniqlo t-shirts. That is literally what I wear. And it just is what it is,
Oh, that's I was reading an interview with director David Lynch not too long ago. Noted weirdo, but genius.
Yes.
And his whole thing is reducing the number of decisions, and this is also something that unfortunately you find in like tech CEOs and things like that as well. But if the cleaner and the more automatic, he found like if his routine is locked to where he doesn't really have to turn his brain on, that's all the more room to explore the expanse of the creative self.
Mm-hmm. And this has been my theory all along, and this is why I've only shopped in Uniqlo for 17 years. Is because there's no decisions to be made, You just go and get another black t-shirt when one runs out,
Mm-hmm.
But I really feel like people spend a lot of their time on things that they don't warrant, I'm very productive because I'm not shopping for clothes that I don't know that I want yet. I'll replace, if a t-shirt needs replacing, it'll get replaced. Mm-hmm. With an identical t-shirt. But the timing of like the waste of time, people just window shopping, just dawdling, looking around, what shall I get? And also, I don't know about you, but you're at the mercy of the buyer of the store. Whoever worked his job it is to buy for that store, they're going to choose like 3 black t-shirts and that's all you've got to choose from. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you go online, you can choose from a gazillion t-shirts. And I like to have choice. I like to know that I'm getting what I want.
Yeah. And the one thing the Uniqlo has, for as basic as their items are, they give you a variety of
That's right. They do like 3 t-shirts of varying weights.
Yeah.
And the cheapest one is like $7.99. Mm-hmm. And then the next one up is like $12.99. And then, is $14.99. Then the next one up is $20.
Yeah, and then with each one, the color palette is it's expansive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the color palette is most expansive at the bottom end, weirdly. But those t-shirts are fine. I did wear those t-shirts. And also, I like to buy them in the sale. When there's a sale on and they're shifting stuff and they drop them to $4.99, that's when I'll buy like another half a dozen. That's just the way I operate.
I found that once in my life. I happened to check Uniqlo one day, and it was that $5 shirt sale. I'm like, well, wardrobe's getting an update today.
Exactly. And this is when you have to like strike while the iron is hot. Although I've never ironed any of these Uniqlo clothes. I worry that ironing them would defeat the whole object of their discount, of their lack of value.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say. Doesn't matter. Fell out of the back of my head. But I appreciate it.
I am unfortunately one of those people that never runs out of something to say. And the downside to that is that, you can be considered to be very boring and self-absorbed, but then the other advantage is you can actually get paid to just sit and talk.
Absolutely.
So you kind of have to weigh it up,
Do you find that affects your desire to be conversational at this point in your career? if you're just in the world and in life, is there a point where, I mean, if you're engaged in the conversation and you're enjoying yourself, that's one thing, but have you found points where you're in a conversation that maybe isn't the one you want to be in the most, or maybe you feel like you're doing an undue amount of the effort and you're like, I'm not on the clock right now, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I'm not working, I don't really like to say very much. I also don't like to use the telephone.
Interesting.
You know, I won't talk on the telephone because that reminds me too much of work. Because I spent so many years doing a phone-in, you know, like a radio phone-in.
Oh.
And so I just don't like to talk on the telephone. I like a FaceTime. Very happy with a FaceTime.
Sure.
Very comfortable with the FaceTime. Because that's like seeing somebody, you know. And also I never FaceTime on my phone. I only FaceTime on an iPad because I like people's faces to be life-size.
Right.
So I stand the iPad up and, like, you know, I sit with them and it's like we're having a face-to-face conversation. Like, that for me is the ultimate, you know, modern form of communication. And, you know, I've often thought this, especially when you live away from your family, you know, you live abroad and your family are back, you know, 5,000 miles away, is that, you know, we used to put my mum at the dinner table, like at the head of the table on the iPad. And she would be joining us for dinner. I'd even almost plate up some food for her, you know, just to kind of include her.
That's
wonderful.
wonderful.
I think that... And then, you know, when I saw my mum at Christmas, I didn't really have anything to say to her, you know, like it all been said on FaceTime. You know, there was no real difference in terms of like seeing her in the flesh versus seeing her on FaceTime. I don't think, you know, like you and I, we can spend a few days chatting here and just talking, and it's like if we met, we'd be like, oh, hi. Saw you yesterday.
Yeah. Well, we could pick up. I think there's something to be... It's a marvel, and good for you that you have an older generation in your life that is willing to commit to learning how to make that work.
Yeah.
Because it's a thing. I used to work in an Apple retail store, and part of my job was to give lessons to largely retirees early in the morning on how to use these technologies in the early days of FaceTime. And man, there are just some, and by some I mean a lot of people that are in advanced stages, and I can't fault them for it. I look at it as their brain is full. They've got no more room.
No more space. Their
It's
megabytes are like full up. Yeah.
Exactly.
They need to delete some things.
We got to forget, I don't know, the war, maybe an ex-wife, something like that.
Yeah.
But the ones that do, it's a marvel because it opens up a whole new... I mean, like with my grandparents, I remember when I came up there, I got them to watch The Crown and the Two Popes because I said, hey, gang, why aren't you on my Netflix account? And they said, what? I said, oh, boy, here we go. And just if you can communicate it and they have the aptitude, there is something about modern convenience and technology in terms of communication and entertainment that is neat. It's universal, and it feels like you're, especially if it's someone that you're related to. For me, at least, it's this semblance of giving back. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but there was an interesting moment of being a child of divorce, but having both my mom and my dad on the same Spotify family plan. I said, I guess this is
brought
healing.
Everybody together.
This is it. We've done it.
I you know, genuinely, I would have. I think if my grandmother was still alive and she had an Echo speaker, and she was able to talk to... she was able to talk to...
Capital A to spell that.
Or Lexi. Let's just call her Lexi.
Lexi. There we go. I like that.
She would have had a much nicer existence. You know, because she lived on her own, and she watched TV, but she didn't go out that much. And I actually think that if you are living on your own, and if you are not particularly mobile, to have Lexi in the house, and to be able to ask it questions about, you know, just normal stuff, the weather, or the, you know, even what time it is, you know, or is it, you know, or just having it do reminders for you, or saying open Backchannel, or any of these things, you know. I just think it's wonderful. And also, I mean, I have mine set up now for smart, you know, skills, so it turns on and off lights and various things. And even the TV, I say, you know, Lexi, turn off the television. And it just, ping, off it goes. And it's just like, it's kind of brilliant, you know? It's brilliant.
That's remarkable. It's
so simple. And I really do feel there's a whole generation of people that are benefiting from this, you know, the smart speaker technology.
100%. There's an inherent danger I've found in especially like my grandparents' generation. My grandma's in her mid 80s, very with it, and possibly with it. Still, as far as I know, runs my dad's finances. But there's this intermediary danger of my parents' generation trying to explain my generation's technology to their parents' generation, and more often than not, because I'm pretty much the only young person left that will pop up and hang out for a while. Every time I show up, there has been some new development that has someone made an attempt to implement into my grandmother's life, and they've just done a terrible job of it.
Interesting.
And there's this whole mess that I get to clean up of, well, they said that like a smart device or something like that was going to be a good idea, and now there's some service somebody's paying for, or something's plugged in, or something stopped working, and if you haven't grown up with the technology and you haven't had to use it, it's still not the most easy of an on-ramp.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you, because I've been like the tech support person for about 250 people for most of my adult life, because nobody seems to know anything, and it drives me crazy, because I just feel like I used to get calls from people I didn't even know. They'd be like, "Oh, so-and-so's recommended you. Could you fix my Mac?" And I'd be like, "What?"
That's right. You've been a long time, not just Mac guy, but a real power user, so to speak.
I've been the Mac guy. I've been a lot of people's Mac guys for a long time. In fact, I used to have a Mac guy myself called Dave. I called him Computer Dave. I didn't know his surname.
I love that.
And he was recommended to me by a friend, and and this is the very early days. My Mac OS was 7.53, just so you know, right? Mac OS 7.53.
That's incredible.
And so, obviously, it never worked because of the extensions manager, which you won't even know about. And so I would phone Computer Dave, and he would kind of say, "What about this? What about that? What about this?" And I was on a Mac Classic, by the way, in those days. And then I upgraded to a Performer 6400. Do you remember a Performer 6400?
Yeah, I think there was a series of hieroglyphs at the back of the Apple Store we used to reference.
And so, anyway, Computer Dave would take my call all the time. I didn't know who he was. We'd have nice chats. He was very personable, and he'd help me out. And then one day I phoned him, and he said, "Oh, I can't really help you anymore." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because I'm the editor of Macworld magazine now." Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, at least it wasn't an accident. Good Lord.
Right?
Yeah, that'll do it.
It just really made me laugh, because I genuinely had no idea that who this guy was or anything about him, and here we are, all these years later, laughing about him.
Something similar happened to me not too long ago.
Yeah.
I bought a keyboard. I bought a piano, a MIDI keyboard off of a guy from Craigslist in my neighborhood, and it was really convenient. I've been looking for a weighted keyboard of this make, and it was just the perfect deal. And I get to this guy's house, and I'm walking around, and he's showing me the keyboard and stuff, and I start to notice that in this single-family house in Westchester, California, there's a bunch of platinum records on the wall. Just like an undue number of platinum records for this guy's whole vibe. And I'm like, what is going on? And then we're wrapping up, and I'm like, all right, I have to ask, are you a collector? What's the deal with this whole stuff? And he goes, oh, no, I'm a road tech. I'm a guitar technician. I fix people's guitars on tour. And I'm like, oh. He's like, yeah, there was a Rage Against the Machine Battle of Los Angeles platinum record on the wall. I was like, yeah, I toured with them on that. I fixed all their stuff. And goes on to tell me that, he's the touring guy for George Benson. He just went out with ZZ Top. All just these giant, impossible tours, telling me stories of how Ricky Martin once had a 14-story keyboard setup going on, and how he was in the room when Audio Slave first formed, and they auditioned Chris Cornell for it. He was the only other guy not in the band there. And it all wraps up, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, so I got this guitar that needs work. And he's like, yeah, bring it over, sure.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and he's working. I'm just like, wow, this is great. I love Los Angeles.
Yeah. This is the wonderful thing about being here, is that just crazy stuff happens like that.
Yeah.
And, I kind of, it's very hard to describe how You can have chance meetings with people, and then there's the whole kind of fascinating history to kind of enjoy. And there's so many people like you and I who are sitting working from home surrounded by musical instruments and like equipment and mics and home recording gear, and just sitting, and some of us are live streaming like we are now, and others are just sitting making music quietly or recording or writing and this is a huge thing, because years ago music technology was kind of quite a niche, and now everyone has got a microphone, a USB mic, or everyone's like got a ring light so that they can look nice on Zooms. Everybody's is on a podcast. It's become like the whole world now is broadcasting and has a say. And I think it's wonderful because, when I was growing up, nobody had a say. Like, you weren't allowed to have an opinion.
Interesting.
You could write a letter to the newspaper, the national newspaper, the Times newspaper. You could write a letter to the letters section, and if you were lucky, 1 in a million, that letter would be published in the newspaper, and you would be like, wow, did you see so-and-so? They got their opinion in the newspaper. Like that much, like 4 lines. There was no public opinion. There was no say. There was no talkback. There was no voice. And yet now everybody has a voice. And the likes of Candace Owens, who is very much on the fringes of, common sense, can have this view and put it out, and everybody agrees. I just reposted it, actually. And a whole bunch of people are like, I don't get it. Why is she wrong? Because I just put this person as a huge right-wing personality with 3 million Twitter followers, and she's completely wrong. And people are like, why is she wrong?
And this is, progress isn't necessarily linear, and I think this is an example of that, to where this is the idea of open platforms and everybody having a voice is both a gigantic step forward and an incredible series of side steps.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The framing of things now is such that I just think people don't know what is real anymore. And when you're dealing with a right-wing personality who in previous years wouldn't have a say because they wouldn't be allowed to, their opinion was irrelevant because they're nuts.
Yeah.
But now social media gives you the opportunity to be legitimized. And she has a blue tick on Twitter, so she's considered to be the real deal. And therefore that authenticates her opinion, even though her opinion is just insane.
Unfortunately, I've spoken to people, even like my mother, even I think at one point, broke down to tears at some point over the last couple of years, because she's like, it's just living in rural Nevada and in the socio-political climate that is. It's like, it's so hard to find the thread of truth in the world today. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what to listen to, and it's it's tough. It's real tough.
Yeah. Well, that's what my other job is. That's what my other job is. I do a show called 5 Minute News, which is basically what your mum is looking for.
Oh,
that's kind
perfect.
That's my.
Well, she likes you already, so this is an easy.
Well,
sell.
There you go. You let her know. But that's my day job. Listen, I think we're done. But it's been a pleasure. Oh, Debbie's there. Can I say that that Travis has helped to open my mind? Oh, Travis has helped to open my mind. Debbie.
I didn't know that you were there.
It's so cute.
It's cyclical. I was raised in a household that was taught to love unconditionally, regardless of who, what, when, where, or why.
Well, that's wrong for a start. Listen, thank you. What a pleasure. I've really enjoyed us, getting to know each other this last couple of weeks. It's been fun. And also nice getting to know your mum as well. Next time I say your mum, at least I know who I'm dealing with.
Fantastic. I'll do it again. Let's do it again soon sometime.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, take care. And your pal Hal is next, and he'll be doing the same thing, just, with hair and no beard. Have yourself a really good Friday. And